Hey everybody, Tony D and little Joan here with a lamp video. Joan. Joan just got her haircut and a bath, so she is a little bit timid right now. Yeah, she's looking for she's a little clingy right now because she's had a traumatic experience, you see, at her spa day that cost me money. You cost me money, dog. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm gonna put you down so I can make my various points, okay? So why don't you just go back to sleep and you could dry out. Anyhow, lamp video about, well, I was watching some Jordan Peterson and some Brett Weinstein, and both have podcasts, by the way, which are fantastic if you haven't seen them. They just reposted Jordan Peterson taking down the Communist Manifesto, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But they got into some stuff which I've sort of touched on in some of my videos, but I never could sort of quite put it together. And it was sort of a moment where great minds think alike kind of thing. Not that I'm considering I'm putting myself in them, but they just had a similar thought. And it was actually Peterson quoting or talking about Dostoevsky, the Russian guy. That sounds like that. I can't say the name. Anyhow, the idea that people on the left are kind of not developed, right? Because, and I've talked about this in my videos about education, how education's just like, at least in the public sphere, gone down the tubes. There's no discipline. There's just none. It's just get my kid graduated. Even back in my day, we started to see some of that, but when I was a kid, for the most part, there were a lot of male teachers still in the business, and they were certainly willing to say, hey, you little a-hole, don't do that, and correct you. They'd correct your behavior, and no one would take the side of a student. Now, that in and of itself created some problems. Certainly, there are teachers that abuse kids and go too far, but those are exceedingly rare. Most are just trying to correct kids based on values that most parents were on board with. And I remember a time when I guess I was in 6th grade. I had done something which I'm not proud of, which I won't go into. And a teacher corrected me, and he was mad. He was very disappointed in me. And he grabbed me by the collar and he shook me, like, kind of cursed me out a little bit and said, you little, don't ever do that again, and I got into some trouble. But the thing was, had it been, say, 2021, I could have gone to my parents, they could have sued the school, that teacher would have been fired for dare laying a hand on me, much less correcting me. It wouldn't have mattered what I had done. It was, teachers don't do that. And because we now live in a world where touching a student, forget it. You even go near a student. I don't substitute one of the districts because I made a joke to one of the students. Like, he kept asking me to go to the bathroom. He clearly, he said, I got to get a drink. I got to go to the bathroom. He wouldn't do his work. And he said, I need to get a snack. I'm starving. I said, well, I guess you'll starve. And we'll just walk over you when we all go to lunch. Something like that, I said. Some kind of joke, like, I guess you'll just starve. Like, I didn't actually intend him to starve, obviously, but it was, he reported me. And the school, of course, was like, you can't say that to a student. So there was no mechanism from which I could correct him other than to say no and have him ask me again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And he knew that. The student knew that. The student knew that if he kept pressuring me, either eventually I'd break, and there was no real mechanism which I can punish him. I couldn't punish him for going to get a drink and ask for a snack because the teacher who I had substituted for, allowed the students to go to the bathroom, get drinks, and get snacks whenever they wanted. So in my view, she wasn't disciplining the students. And when I was a kid, you could have snacks. Snacks? What are you, crazy? Maybe if you had a doctor's note. If you had a doctor's note, you're hypoglycemic. Yes, that student could have the snacks because they needed them. But it wasn't open season. But these kids know the deal, right? Oh, my blood sugar's low. Yeah, no. Most kids, their blood sugar doesn't drop low enough that they absolutely need a snack or a drink. Now, yes, there are teachers who are petty, tyrants or whatever. Some kid who's like, oh my God, I just ran here and it's really hot, I need a drink. And then they go, no. And they pass out or whatever. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about an atmosphere in which these, I think they were fourth graders, fifth graders maybe, could just get a drink, go to the bathroom, get snacks whenever they wanted. And they were not doing their work. And that was totally secondary. Their work, when I was in school, the work was the primary thing. Get your work done, then maybe I'll let you go to the bathroom or get a drink or whatever. Which is reasonable unless you're holding, unless the kid's like on the brink or something. And when I was in school one time, some kid really had to go to the bathroom and teacher wouldn't let him. He said, well, I'm going, and he left. And there was a big to-do about it, and the student won that. But the problem is now, whenever there's a problem like that, they immediately side with the student. It used to be they'd always side with the teacher. Now they immediately side with the student in every possible circumstance. So in response, the teachers have said, okay, fine. I can't do anything. I can't discipline your kid. And then those same parents, many of them are dysfunctional. And like, I was thinking too, that it's not just a dysfunctional, even just one dysfunctional parent is horrific, because you'll have one parent that's doing the work and the other parent's just like, I'm off to go do something fun. Let the kids do whatever they want. But really now we have entire families, I think, who are completely dysfunctional from top to bottom. Neither one of the parents are doing any of the parenting. I met a woman. To me, she was a kid. She was younger, and she was like 18, 20. And her parents, when she described them, and the fact that they literally gave her no guidance, gave her a key to the house and told her to come and go as she pleased, and were like out of her life. I was dropping her off. We were doing a project and she was in the group, and I was dropping people off, and I said, where am I dropping you off? She said, well, I guess you could drop me at my parents', but I forgot my key and I can't get in. I said, oh, well, can you call them? I could drop you off wherever they are. And she's like, no, they're away for a few weeks. Now, like, my parents went away for a few weeks when I was that age, and I was still living with them, and they would coordinate with me and like make sure I had a key. It didn't seem like her parents cared. It literally did not seem that they cared at all. She said, when she told me, I was like, well, is there anybody you could stay with? I mean, can you call them? Is there you got a hidden key somewhere? Like, I was trying to help her. And the more I asked her about her family life, she got more and more upset, and then sort of broke down in the car and told me like, yeah, my parents kind of just don't participate in my life. And I was horrified. Like, this is the most horrifying thing I had ever heard from a person about their family. Like, and then later, and I sort of keep in contact. We're sort of Facebook friends. She moved to a major city, and she's a little messed up because of that, I think. She's very much a hipster, very much just, I'll just say she's kind of in a sexual scene, if you will, just running around banging guys and girls and I guess having a good time, but I don't think she's having a good time. I think she's lost. And I think a lot of that's on her parents, and it's going to be a few years before she sort of figures out how screwed up that is, if she figures it out at all. So what kind of parent would she be? Sleeping around, she could get knocked up. She could end up having a kid and be yet another single mom trying to raise a kid. But a lot of times you look to the parent and how to raise your kid. What's she going to do? Check out? Say, well, this is the way my parents raised me. I'm going on a date. So I think a lot of people on the left are kind of from these sort of families. They're not, they got, and some of them have money, if not a lot of them. They have money, but they're effed up. They have no values because they haven't been given any values. They haven't been given any limits. So you've got, schools that aren't teaching you any kind of discipline, like none, like everything. You are total in control of your life to the nth degree. So much so that the authority figures are afraid of you, and teachers are afraid of the students, I think. Then you get out of high school and you get into college, and now we have a situation in which the college professors, first off, college professors do not instill discipline usually. They usually are just like, well, you're paying for this, show up to class or don't. And then the ones who are, or many of them who are total freaking communists, they are teaching this idea of collectivism. And that has become their second family. The whole idea of communism is very appealing because it's like, oh, well, here's somebody to take care of me. My parents don't give a crap. And this is part of the discussion that Peterson was having with Weinstein. Like, they see the state as mommy and daddy. The left is mommy, the right as daddy. But really, it's the left that is exploiting that and saying, yeah, we will take care of you. Just do a few things for us first, and it'll be perfect. And they're really overpromising, which they always do, to win. Because that's kind of the way you win political battles. You overpromise and underdeliver and then spin it. And when I say this is a trend, it is a trend in that high schoolers get caught up in trends. And so most of these people, I think, are still high schoolers at heart. They got whatever they wanted while they were in high school. They were completely free to do whatever. A lot of them are having sex, doing drugs at that age. And they're living a hedonist lifestyle that of no consequences. None. There's no consequences. Unless you happen to be unfortunate enough to take it too far, which some of them do. So, I've met young guys who are like, they smoke pot like nonstop. Which, that's what you want to do. I'm a libertarian. I'm fine with it, but they don't have much ambition beyond that. And then you got young women now who have taken it as a sign of empowerment to just go out and have tons and tons of boyfriends and be poly or be in a relationship, but also date. And simply because they can't. They just can't. Some hot 20-something, she could bang every guy she meets. Why wouldn't she? From her perspective. But the downside of that, you don't realize until later. You get to be 35, 40, and now you want a relationship. Now you want kids. Well, the clock is ticking, and now you got to settle. Or now no one's interested in you because now you're overweight and you got all these miles on you, and it doesn't look good. Maybe you got some STD you can't shake, um, and you get more desperate. And so now you've got these women on Tinder who, man, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. You're past your prime. Now you want a long-term relationship. There were guys who would have, done anything to be in a long-term relationship with you. And then the ones who do get into a long-term relationship, hit their mid-30s and like, well, I've had my kids with this guy. Now it's time for the next chapter in my life. It's time for me to have fun. So they divorced their husbands and now they're on Tinder dating. And those are the ones that are in my age group. And I find those the least appealing because I look at them and I go, yeah, I don't want to be with someone like that. Like, I don't want to be with someone who are just like, well, now it's time for my turn. What can you do to make my life awesome? And my attitude is just like, I'm not looking for someone like that. I'm not looking for someone that I can serve. So these sort of leftists, these Antifa types, BLM types who are out there, they're protesting. They no longer make any sense whatsoever. And it's like the old days when I went to anti-war protests, the socialists would show up, and a lot of times they'd even organize the anti-war protest, but they would always fail because the anti-war protest would always devolve into, yeah, we're here against the imperialist, and we want free housing for everybody. Wait, what? And we want free education. No, I didn't come here for that. And we want guaranteed jobs, and it would just devolve into like, I didn't come for the socialist utopia you commies are trying to bring in. I was here just to stop the war. Can we just work on that? Which they would invariably fail with because the anti-war movement was just a pretense to push socialism on people, which nobody wanted. So they would end up driving everybody away who showed up to these things. Now that sort of socialism and communism is in vogue, that it's cool to be an Antifa, and more than that, it's not only cool. I saw a magazine cover for Los Angeles Magazine, I think it was, and you had like some high-end schoolgirl in a private school with a t-shirt that said resist, but it was a really nice, like, she's impeccably dressed. She's drinking out of Starbucks. She's on her phone. And it's like, this is Antifa. This is Antifa. This are these delusional college kids who have been programmed to protest. Because what else is there? What else is there to do? They're not getting their way. Ergo, you complain. And how do you complain in the world of the leftists? Well, you're out on the streets and you complain until they give you what you want. And that's what I think they're doing. And slowly they're getting more and more desperate and more violent. I see the protests are turning more and more violent, and they're getting more and more antsy too. They're going online, they're finding about all these tactics, these Alinsky tactics mostly. We talked about this in Wokistan, a novel. Saul Alinsky wrote Rules for Radicals, and it was all these different, and he wrote this in the early 70s. It was all these techniques you could use to basically egg on the establishment into overreacting, because the object is to get them to overreact and then go, oh, I'm being oppressed. So everybody sees that and goes, well, obviously it's the protesters. And they're fine with that, because it was the same sort of thing when I confronted that kid in 5th grade and I said over and over again, please just do your work and then you can go get a drink. And he's just like, no, I'm protesting. And I'm going to egg you on until I get a reaction at you. See, I got a reaction at you. Now I'm going to report you. Now you're gone. Now I'm going to get somebody who's weak enough or willing to just ignore me or give me what I want. And that's what sort of permeated down all the way into the grammar school level. But the one thing we have going for us is that I think this is a trend, and these people are incredibly weak. So at some point, the trend will shift, and the anti-woke, I think, will be the next trend. It'll be trendy to go, hey, commie, get lost. Or, hey, commie, here's a meme, you're an idiot, kind of thing. Like, that'll be more fun and trendy than it is to go out and like protest some trial. It'll be more trendy to do the opposite, which has its own problems too, because these same sort of sheep, once going the other way, will take it too far, as they did during the Bush era. There were the same sort of people who are marching in Antifa are the same people who got caught up in 9/11 and immediately signed up for the army to go fight them over there. Now, I'm not disparaging them, because at least they were serving their country, you could say, but they were caught up in something that they didn't quite understand. It's the same thing with the Antifa guys. They're caught up in something they don't quite understand. But unlike a guy who might serve and come home, hopefully uninjured, a lot of people got injured, though. A lot of people got killed. These people are going to have almost worse psychological scars, because they're going to be spent as human beings, because they're living this lifestyle of, the leftist, where gender doesn't matter, relationships don't matter, nothing matters. At least the guy who's an ex-soldier, even if he's injured, he can sort of pick up his life and move on, and he has something. The Antifa guys won't have anything when this is all over. They'll have nothing. A criminal record, maybe. And that's about it. So the downside of that is, if you look at protesters from the 70s and 80s, where did those guys end up? Well, a lot of them ended up dead or in jail. But some of them ended up right back into politics, as we saw with BLM, one of the fundraisers. She was one of the women who bombed the U.S. Capitol, actually bombed it, actually set off a bomb back in the 80s during, she was pardoned in the 80s during the Clinton administration. No, the bomb was set off in the 80s. She was pardoned during the Clinton administration. They caught her group with, 300 pounds of explosives. It's a lot of explosives. And yet she was pardoned and then invited back into society because, hey, says the left, you fought the man, therefore you have cred, come join us. And it's like, that should be a negative. That should be, you psychopath, get out of here. You have no business being in politics. That's the way it should have been. She should not be welcome back in politics, in my view, in any form, whether it's nonprofit or whatever. Now, you could argue that BLM wasn't meant to be political. It totally is. It totally is. And, I don't think she's learned her lesson at all. Because just like these kids haven't been disciplined and continue to scream for what they want and don't understand the consequences of what they do, she screamed until, and other leftists screamed until Bill Clinton pardoned her. And what good did that do? Did that do her any favors? I guess you could argue it did her a favor. It didn't do the rest of us any favors, because she's helping funnel money into BLM. So I would say the culture war is probably more important than we realize. Because if we can get this trend to die, if we could turn the trend, and this is what's so damaging about big tech, they're hurting that cause. We need to make the trend funnier and fun so they join our side. And that's why I always address people on the other side, even though I'm like calling them dummy or whatever, because I still think it's important to try to bring these guys out of it. Because if you could start bringing them out of it, then some of those people hopefully are going to wake up and go, well, what happened to, Bill? Oh yeah, he's not in the group anymore. He quit. when others see the Antifa members start to quit, when it starts to be like, yeah, there's so many, this is so boring, this is so tiresome, this is the same thing every time. That's when people are going to start to quit, and they're going to start to look for something else. And what we want them to do, hopefully, is come to the side of sanity and not be radical leftists anymore, not even be Democrats anymore at this point, because we've seen the damage that the entire process of the left, from the radical leftists all the way to the Democrats and the spectrum in between, they've just done so much damage. So, and again, I mean, go to your PTA meetings if you have a kid or whatever, because that's where it's happening. That's where it's happening. And right now, critical race theory is the next step. And if you're not trying to stop that, and you'll have nobody to blame but yourself when your kid comes home from school one day and calls you, a colonialist or racist or whatever. Anyhow, that was my thinking. Sorry for the long rant. Let's move on to the next one.